I'm Maj-Britt Frenze, and I teach medieval and early modern history at the Well-Trained Mind Academy. I have a doctorate in medieval studies from the University of Notre Dame, where my research focused on the languages and literatures of medieval England, France, and Scandinavia. I taught several undergraduate courses at the University of Notre Dame, both as a teaching assistant and as an instructor of record. I've also taught high school level courses through the University of Virginia's Curry School of Education summer program. In addition to teaching and publishing my own research, I work as a translator and editor, primarily in French to English projects. I love to teach history because I love reading primary sources. That is to say, I love reading stories. I love reading the chronicles and histories of the distant past. I love all the weird and wonderful details that don't always make it into the history textbooks. I love hearing what a contemporary author thought about Constantine the Great, Attila the Hun, or Joan of Arc. History studied through primary source texts is anything but dry and dusty. My classes generally consist in a lecture with frequent interludes of class discussion. I structure all my lectures using a PowerPoint filled with primary source quotations, of course, images, and maps. Before class, I expect students to have read the assigned readings for the week and complete homework, which is typically due the day before class. There are two types of homework assignments in my classes: reading IDs, which are basically reading notes organized by major historical character or event, and discussion questions, which are short paper responses that may be used as material for class discussion. Other graded assignments include, of course, papers and exams. I strive to bring in a lot of interdisciplinary material into my courses. So, in my medieval class, we will periodically look at images and excerpts from medieval manuscripts and bestiaries, or take a stab at solving an Old English riddle. During our unit on European colonization in the early modern class, we view and analyze maps of the Old and the New Worlds developed over the 16th century, reflecting changing conceptions of geography. My live classes consist in a lot of group discussion and interpretation of primary source excerpts and images. My goal as an instructor is both to satisfy and pique the curiosity of my students. I want my students to conclude our course of study confident that they have learned a lot of interesting and relevant things, but I also want to leave them hungry for more, and ever the more aware of how much there is out there to learn. The historical context of this teaching sample today is the Viking raids in the British Isles. This lesson would occur mid-year in our History of the Medieval World course, pertaining to content in Chapter 56 of History of the Medieval World by Susan Wise Bauer. The year is 793 AD. The event is the Viking raid of the monastery of Lindisfarne, Lindisfarne being an island off the northern coast of England. This event is viewed by historians as the beginning of the Viking Age. The end of the Viking Age is often also dated by significant events occurring in England: the Battle of Stamford Bridge and the Battle of Hastings in 1066. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, an historical account, states in its entry for the year 793, "In this year, fierce, foreboding omens came over the land of the Northumbrians, and the wretched people shook. There were excessive whirlwinds, lightning, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the sky. These signs were followed by a great famine, and a little after those, that same year, on the 6th Ides of January, the ravaging of wretched heathen men destroyed God's church at Lindisfarne." This account is a very interesting historical text that combines what we modern people would likely consider objective historical data, such as the year or day of the event, the location of the event, and people involved. But it also contains other sorts of data, namely signs and omens, fantastical beasts like dragons, ominous weather, things that are being used by the author to create a kind of apocalyptic atmosphere. Was there literally a dragon or dragons seen in the sky before the sack of Lindisfarne? Well, I wasn't there, so I don't really know. But whether or not the author of the passage really believed a dragon was there, the dragon is used to indicate the devastation and terror of the people who experienced this event. Dragons in this passage are a kind of data point, one that can give insights into the imagination of the text's author. We'll turn now to another excerpt that describes the same event. This one is from Alcuin of York, who lived roughly from 730 to 804 AD, a Northumbrian monk, so also from England, but he was a scholar at Charlemagne's court at the time, Charlemagne being the Holy Roman Emperor and King of the Franks. Alcuin wrote about this event. Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The heathens poured out the blood of saints around the altar and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets. Alcuin is describing the same event, but emphasizing the irreverence of these violent Vikings, and further depicting the deaths of those monks in Lindisfarne as a sort of martyrdom. So these are two different texts describing the same event. They both use highly religious imagery, and they are both prioritizing depicting the Vikings as fearsome, violent heathens, in contrast to the Christians at Lindisfarne. But the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle does so by creating a whole atmosphere of apocalyptic imagery, where even the weather seems to be influenced by these terrifying events. In the excerpt of Alcuin, the emphasis lies upon the violent deaths of holy men and the spiritual status of the men who murdered them. One event, two texts. Very interesting primary sources.